and welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is the one about Gypsy Rose Lee. Thank you for listening. Hello, I'm Richard.
And I'm Cleo.
And welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is our podcast where we go to thrift shops.
Or op shops, or charity shops.
And we go straight to the bookshelves and we look for memoirs and autobiographies of people of note. And then we read them.
And then we have a chat.
But we're not allowed to talk about them until we press record, which we're going to do right now. Even though obviously I've pressed record, otherwise you wouldn't be hearing what we're saying right now.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
Anyway.
Okay, we'll start talking right now. That's what we mean.
Hello, Cleo.
All right, let's crack on. Hi, Richard. I've got a massive, amazing book in my head that I really want to talk to you about.
Oh, my God. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. Gypsy Rose Lee's autobiography.
Gypsy Rose Lee.
It's just one of the best ones ever, isn't it? It's unbelievable.
It's so funny, isn't it?
Yes. Well, you usually ask me what I knew before, and I'm going to be honest and say I read it years ago.
Okay.
And I absolutely loved it. And I'd never even seen the musical then. I didn't even know anything about her. Just found it as in a thrift shop.
Have you seen the musical now?
I have now. I saw Imelda Staunton in it, and it was absolutely stonking. But what you don't get is so much of this book, because there's only so much you can put in a musical.
Do they put animals in the musical?
I don't think they do, actually, no. But there's just, and they exaggerate the poverty. They have them eating cat food or something. They're never, ever hungry. But, you've got to read this book. Anyone who's interested in the musical or Gypsy Rose Lee has to read this book, would you say?
I would say to anybody who's interested or not interested that they have to read this book. Even if you didn't know anything about her, you've never heard of her name before, read this book because it's just highly entertaining.
I tell you what I realised as well is it was easy for them to write a musical, relatively speaking, right? Because she writes it like it's already a script. She puts words, these characters are alive. She actually says what they say. The dialogue's already there. They could just lift it off the page. You're there.
It's interesting because halfway through, when she's still like a teenager, she does talk about going and getting a pad of paper and a pencil and starting to write Act 1. But she never gets around to it. But in a sense, she of course gets around to it because she's written this book and it's become a musical.
Yeah. And she becomes an avid reader when she's on the road, and she's stashing away books and hanging out in bookshops, reading sonnets. She's an intellect. You think, how can this famous stripper be an amazing writer? And she absolutely is. The descriptions in this book, you can see the rooms. It's like a really amazing historic account of the vaudeville era. It's visual. It's really visual. You can see the wallpaper. You can see the curtains.
Yeah.
You can see the bedspreads and the lampshades. You're there. It's brilliant. Love it.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. So shall we get into it?
Rose Louise Hovick.
Gypsy Rose Lee.
Later known as, way later. Actually, I say way later. She was probably only about 16 when she changed her name, but she'd lived 1,000 lives by then, hadn't she? It's unbelievable. What a life. So, she was born in Seattle, born in 1911. I mean, oh my God, her family are flipping characters, aren't they?
Yeah.
Her mother's mother was clearly a real adventurous woman, because every single time they go back to visit their granddad, the grandma is never there. She's on some adventure somewhere.
Yeah.
She's always off.
Yeah, she really captured little Gypsy Rose Lee's imagination. She called her Big Lady.
Yeah.
Almost mythical in a way.
Yes.
And like in the rare times that she was there, she was absolutely captivated by it. She had amazing hats and she smelled really good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of strong characters in this book, but obviously her mum's the really big one.
Yes.
I mean, she's the storming, stonking, independent, really just will not be stopped woman who insists on going out on the road and turning her little daughters into stars. There's a point where she says, look, all these people, the Masonic lodges, these boring couples, imagine being that stuck in your life. It must be hell. And some people would think that life on the road was hell, like scraping your money together from week to week.
Oh, God, when I was reading this book, I kind of thought it's interesting to read, but I kind of thought I couldn't do it.
No, I know.
It does sound like hell.
Kind of does.
I'd rather be at the Masonic Lodge.
I know. I get that it's a really interesting life, but it's kind of tough. It is very gypsy. But anyway, so her mum married a reporter from the Seattle Times. which is, that's quite a...
Now, is that Gypsy Rose's and her sister June? Is that actually their dad? I couldn't quite figure it out.
I think so. It seems to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of men coming and going, isn't there?
Yes. That seems to be their dad, but it's not a person that features in their lives. Grandpa is, but... So,
Grandpa is way more like the father figure, really, I get from this.
He is.
And like every time they're down on their luck and things fall through, they do go back to stay with Granddad, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And he's very understanding, considering. So they always come back with, a lamb, a pig, a boy, whatever, like, all sorts. Yeah, my mother divorced the dad when Gypsy Rose Lee, or Rose, was 4. June, the sister, is younger. She's famous as June Havoc, but I now realise suddenly that she would have been Hovick and she's turned it to Havoc.
Yeah.
Because she became a famous actor. She's always popping up. There's a Murder, She Wrote where she's in it, and they're on a cruise ship.
Oh, no kidding, is she?
Yeah, I would, you wouldn't notice her until you've read this book, and then you're like, oh my God, she had an insane life.
Right.
Yeah, and she's knocked around a lot longer, actually. She lived a lot longer. But anyway, so June was the talent. They had dancing lessons when they were kids, and June was the talent.
Yeah, I felt really sorry for Gypsy Rose Lee because she's the older one. But June, who was about 18 months younger? There wasn't a massive gap.
Yeah.
But she seemed to be like the pretty talented one. And
yeah, she's much prettier as well.
Poor Gypsy Rose Lee.
Yeah.
So she was like the star of the show and she was the one who was pushed forward like Gypsy Rose Lee. I felt bad for her. She seemed to be like the dowdy one that nobody noticed.
Yeah, she is the ugly duckling that became the swan.
Yeah.
And rose above them all. That is kind of her story. It took her a really long time. It took her to stripping to get noticed.
Yeah, right.
It did, though, didn't it?
It's a good tactic to get noticed.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it works for a lot of people. Yeah, so if you think they were on the road from 4 years old and June was 2.5, it's a hell of a time between 4 to 16 when she started doing burlesque. They were older than their years.
Well, yeah, their mum would manipulate their ages according to what she needed at the time.
Oh, yeah, they were always older than
until they needed a cheap train ticket and then they'd be younger.
Yeah, exactly.
Mum was a real hustler, wasn't she?
Oh, my God, that is the word for her. Yeah. Hard as nails.
I mean, exploitative, really. I was trying to think, this is an exciting showbiz story, and we're used to kids performing in vaudeville, because we read Fred Astaire, and him and his sister started off when they were children. But it's kind of like, if you equate it to any other industry, it just wouldn't be acceptable.
That's true.
That a mother was taking her children across the country from the age of 2.5 and 4, and for the entirety of their childhood, she was just completely, in a way, just using them to make money. It is so exploitative, but because it's showbiz, we kind of all accept it. But it's hard, isn't it, on those kids?
Yeah, it's really true. But the mother, all the way through it, she says, isn't this great, kids? You're having such an exciting life. When you're older, you'll look back and you'll go, oh, the adventures we had.
Gaslighting.
Yeah, well, either that or she genuinely thinks that it's the really exciting life for these kids.
Yeah, I kind of imagine it is more exciting than sitting in a classroom, travelling around the country and being in shows with animals and stuff. But I think there comes a point where, she's pushing them so hard at certain points. Anyway, we should get on with the exciting story.
We should get on with it. So, yeah. So, she had them at first doing shows in Grandpa's Masonic lodges. That's where they got started. That's where they honed their act. And it is proper vaudeville where it's all singing, all dancing, tap dancing, bits of scenery, silly costumes, that sort of music hall songs.
Are we even in the 1920s yet? This is still the 1910s, isn't it?
Yeah, this is. Yeah. Oh, by the way, she's called Rose Louise, but they call her Louise. She's called Louise all the way through the book until she becomes Gypsy Rose Lee.
Mm-hmm.
But
her mum's Rose, isn't she?
Yeah, that's right. Louise's song was I'm a Hard-Boiled Rose.
Hard-boiled.
They see how confusing is that? Because the mum's Rose. But yeah, that was her song for, I don't know, 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
Poor girl. She was going mad because she was dressed as a boy as well, because their act was 6 small boys. And it was called Dainty June and her Newsboy Songsters. And so not to distract from the only girl, She dressed as a newsboy. So
It's so mean.
I know, she's like, her teeth are crooked, she's dressed as a boy, and her sister's all in little ringlets, and her mum does her hair every night and calls her baby. She calls her baby right till she's 13 and ran away. No wonder.
Yeah, well, of course, the draw initially is that this little 2.5, 3-year-old girl is a tiny toe tapper. It's cute to have this. So it's in mum's interest to keep that girl as young as possible for as long as possible, because that's the draw of the act. So, yeah, she's calling her baby, yeah.
It's completely paving over their natural personalities, isn't it? There's no allowance at all to find out who they might be without a mother. She's controlling them, and they're just quiet. They don't speak up.
So one of the daughters is being forced to be this tiny, cute little girl for years, and the other one's forced to be a boy for years.
A boy? Yeah, I know.
Oh, my word.
It's mad. Yeah, and they really don't speak up. It's sort of Victorian manners, isn't it? She's always saying, I thought this, but I never said anything. And she lets it all build up.
Mum is so imposing, isn't she? She's a bit terrifying, really.
Yeah, she really is. Yeah. And she does it on everybody. She takes all the money. She has this money belt under her clothes where she's stuffing all the dollars and then saying, well, I haven't got any money or I can't pay you. She doesn't pay the dancers. They're doing it for the experience. She's robbed them from their families, taking them on the road.
Yeah, that's surprising as well, that it's not just her daughters, she says. She actually has other children as part of the act. And this first instance, it's these young boys.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it?
I mean, they're kind of in the depression. I guess poverty might have, the families allow their boys to go with this woman on a travelling show. Yeah. It might be because that's a really good opportunity for them at that point. It's a future for them. They probably wouldn't get at home at the moment because it's just poverty, isn't it?
I know, there must be loads because there's so many people come and go during this time. There must be loads of people in America that go, yeah, my gran was on the road with Gypsy Rose Lee. It's bizarre, isn't it? There's loads of them out there. Well, they were getting paid all right, weren't they? Their pay started at about $750 a week. And during the years, as vaudeville started dying out, being replaced by cinema, they started getting paid less and less. It's the other way round from normal stories.
It's interesting how they keep, like at one point in the story, they say that radio is going to kill vaudeville. And then 15 years later, it's the cinema that's going to kill vaudeville.
Yeah.
But actually, it kept going for a long, long time, didn't it, vaudeville?
Yeah, right.
Neither of them actually killed it.
Yeah.
But essentially, I guess it just kind of had its... But did it really ever die? I mean, we still have, I don't know, theatre and musicals.
Yeah, I mean, the British pantomime is... which nobody understands in America, but what it actually is pretty much still vaudeville and music hall.
Yeah, right.
It's the closest you can get to it. Like even the panto cow, because in the pantos in Britain, there's quite often, well, especially in Jack and the Beanstalk, there's always a cow. Daisy the cow, with a front end and a back end, who were dancers. And then she had the cow dream. She fell asleep and dreamed there should be a cow in the act. And then they got one made. And, a cow trots on and everyone loves it. In fact, it's when they added a cow to their act that they really took off.
Yeah, for sure. That really put them on the...
That's what did it. Yeah, then they nabbed a baby lamb and that trotted on with it until it urinated all over the stage. Then they got the baby lamb a nappy, a diaper and a hat. And then it really brought the house down with the little lamb and the cow.
So animals feature a lot in these early years, don't they?
They do. And whenever they want one, they just go to a farm and lean over the wall and take one, don't they?
But they're travelling around a lot and they're travelling with these animals as part of their entourage.
Oh my God, it's the description. They're in this big car. There's a picture of it in the book and it's open top. They've built a tarp so that they can put it over all the scenery and costumes. And they're all jammed into this open top car with the big pig sat in the front seat, dogs and it's absolute madness.
It is. It's like a travelling circus.
It really isn't it? There's a big billboard attached to the car along the side saying Madame Rose presents. It's just, it's a tiny travelling circus.
But as well, when other acts on the circuit have animals, and sometimes they trade or are gifted animals. But like at one point, she says she's watching this woman who has a guinea pig show, and one of the guinea pigs plays the tin whistle. And you kind of think, well, it doesn't, because how could it? So it just must be tricks
tape
and
it
illusion
to the mouth.
and stuff.
I don't know.
Oh, my word. Well, I would love to see that.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
how did radio kill vaudeville? Because you can't see a tin whistle playing guinea pig on the radio. I'd pay good money to go and see that.
Or a little lamb in a nappy.
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
monkeys and they just...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I guess it wouldn't happen now because after the tiger attacked Siegfried and Roy, people don't have animals anymore on stage, do they?
No, they got some laws in.
Yeah, quite rightly.
Yeah, quite rightly. There were already laws to protect kids from exactly this behaviour, and they got arrested all the time. By the way, they were on the Orpheum circuit, which was a really big deal. And those theatres, there's still a few left in America. They're so ornate. They're so stunning. It's such a shame that any of them ever closed. But, yeah, they were constantly being arrested, weren't they? It's very similar to the Fred Astaire thing. They've got their act and they get booked on the circuit and there's loads of other acts and they will feature on the list of acts. So there might be a big singing thing and then they'll come on and do their cow and lamb number. And then there might be a legendary comedy act or something. It's that, isn't it? It's that stuff going on.
Yeah, but the Orpheum circuit is a big deal,
really big
right?
deal.
And they got almost like a year consecutive contract at $1,250 a week. So this is profitable at this point.
Yeah.
But they got that. It was the pantomime cow that kind of boosted them up in the rankings.
Yeah. And because they said at that time, it's probably still the same now, there was always rat poison in the theatres, so the animals had to stay in the hotel with them. They were always trying to smuggle them in.
Yes.
Oh, they're always getting arrested and then having to blag their ages with this and that, and they've got teachers, and eventually they got so sick of it that they had to hire a teacher. And so then they got this woman who was just really happy to be out on the road and loved the adventure. And then they dressed her up like a teacher. They just got her a teacher costume and glasses, tied her hair back. Said, okay, this will help the authorities. I think she taught them a little bit, but mostly she just escorted them places, including then the shops where she realised that the two little girls were just stealing. She did not like that.
And she took them back to the shop and made them own up. Which, of course, their mum was outraged about.
Yeah, because she's the original thief. It's just like she is entitled.
So the girls are really kind of taking after their mother at this point.
They really are.
And then when the teacher takes them back to the shop to own up and give the stuff back they've stolen, mother fires the teacher then, doesn't she?
does.
For making them own up to shoplifting.
I know. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
They're hard, these people. They are wired to be hard. They have to be.
Yeah, and you think that her whole formative years were spent on the road, hustling different hotels, different theatres, different men, and, running into all the other similar acts who presumably had similar stories and with similar types of people. Yeah, it's almost like a criminal underworld, isn't it?
It really is. People always say the theatre is, on a par with prostitution. It's such a similar racket. Mm-hmm. But it really is. And no one ever wants to pay them. They have to fight to be paid.
Yeah.
She says at some point, I wish I could leave somewhere where people were sorry to see me go and would like to see me again. Yeah. But they always leave on bad terms.
That's a mother. Yeah, I mean, I know within this book she's kind of an anti-hero, really. And you kind of root for her. But she's not pleasant, really, the mum.
She is actually unpleasant, but you also get to know her so well. Like this bloke Gordon comes into their life and he sort of becomes a manager and travels along with him, and she never pays him, and they're obviously sleeping together, but she never admits it. And he's saying, why won't you marry me? And she said, I've been married too many times, blah blah blah. And he eventually goes. When he actually eventually leaves, it's probably about 4 years later. She's crying for a week. She can't get out of bed. You do see the soft side to her. Mm. You do get to know her and feel for her a bit. In the musical, that'll be the song Everything's Coming Up Roses.
Okay.
And you just end up crying for her because she's trying to put a brave face on it. And everything is not coming up roses. And her daughter has risen above her and gone on without her.
Right.
Yeah.
And
she's left. That's the end of this book. That's where you leave her. She's scrabbling about, taking in women lodgers. And her daughter's a big star in a fancy apartment in the newspaper all the time. And going to Hollywood. And what's become of this mother? It's her who wanted to be the star. That's the thing. It's her.
Yeah, I think
She
a lot
wanted
of
to
these
be it.
stage mothers, they just live vicariously through their daughters, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't make it right.
No, and that's why it's always her name above the title, Eventually, it became
Right,
Gypsy Rose
presents,
Lee's
yeah.
name, yeah, and she was pushed out.
Well, there was a time when they were like younger and little June had the spotlight. Actually, when Rose Louise, Gypsy Rose, became like a teenager, she had enough and she didn't want to travel around anymore. And they actually had an aunt. Their dad in Seattle had an Aunt Helma who had lost a daughter. And so Mum arranged for Gypsy Rose Lee to basically go and live with Aunt Elma, who'd lost a daughter, and be her daughter. And she was going to give up the road. And they got there and they hung out for a couple of days. And then Gypsy Rose Lee was like, oh, I don't want to live in this house with these people. I want to go back out on the road with my mum.
Yeah, she didn't want it. She found out she didn't want it, which is actually really useful because it must have been a turning point.
Yeah.
Because you're always thinking, I want a normal life. And then she was like, no, this is not for me. I want to go back to the absolute madness that is
Chaos.
Even when they're all staying in hotels, she says the mum's thing was that they'd walk in two at a time, then two would leave, then one more would come in, then three go out, and then four come in. So they get so confused as to how many people there were. They were just lying and cheating and stealing their way across America, weren't they, the whole time?
So at some point in their tour, they're going around, they've been doing it for years now, and the girls are growing up. There comes a point where they play in a theatre on the bill with Fanny Bryce, who's a very successful...
She was the absolute
vaudeville
legend of her day, wasn't she?
Yeah. So Fanny Bryce needs a young girl to be part of a scene within her bit on the bill. And she says to Mama Rose, oh, you've got two daughters. Gypsy Rose Lee instinctively thought, oh, she's going to give it to little June because June is the star. But actually, no. Mama Rose said, no, Gypsy Rose, you're going to go into the scene. And she couldn't believe it. So she went into the dressing room with Fanny Bryce, and Fanny Bryce actually put her in a dress.
Yeah, for the first time. And heels.
And so this young girl who'd been dressed as a boy for like 10 years looks in the mirror and she says she couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe it was herself.
Yeah.
So she looked taller and thinner and older. And she goes on to play a little part in a scene with Fanny Bryce. And all of a sudden she's being perceived and viewed differently. And the audience loves her. And her mum really bigs her up saying, people talked about you afterwards, not Fanny Bryce. You stole her spotlight. And little Gypsy Rose said it's just the happiest day of her life so far. And she hated for it to end.
Yeah. And then she got kicked off the show because she was upstaging Fanny Bryce. Yeah. She cut the number. Yeah.
That's right. And she did, didn't she? Fanny Bryce was jealous.
Yeah. She cut the whole number. And it's amazing because she comes back into her life later because they ended up in the Ziegfeld Follies show together.
Mm-hmm.
And they were as equals then, and they were touring at some point. They were sharing a room. Oh, my God. There's a musical about her. It's called Funny Girl. That's all about Fanny Bryce.
Ah, okay.
I've never actually seen it. I really want to.
Isn't it a film with Barbara Streisand?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she sounds like such a character. And she tours with this massive medicine cabinet with a pill for everything. So if anyone's ill, they come to her. And she pulls out these pills, some of them like 20 years old. She goes, take that. That'll do.
Yeah, she doesn't even know what they are for. What's amazing, I kind of hated reading that. It was so interesting because, we read a lot of contemporary Hollywood stars who have had serious addiction problems. And it's just like, wow, 100 years ago on the vaudeville circuit, people literally were travelling around with pill cabinets.
Oh, wow. I took that as not a recreational in any way. I thought she literally was just a hypochondriac and had, it was all for ailments. And she also liked to help other people.
No, I think that's...
Do you reckon she took half of them?
Yeah, of course.
I'm so
I think there's such a fine line between that anyway. I think it starts off with you thinking, I need this, and then you get hooked on them.
Yeah, true.
And then before you know it,
God, I'm an idiot. 100 books in, I've learned nothing. Oh my God. Okay, so they go to New York City and meet this character called F.E. Gorham.
Yes.
This is why you need more than a musical. You need a whole film to capture this in 3 parts.
Yeah.
F.E. Gorham, what a character. She's basically the same as their mother. She's the same
she
hustler.
met her match.
She totally did. And I absolutely love it that literally F.E. is the initials F.E. Gorham. They never even know her real name. They just call her F.E.
Yeah.
And she says, I know Louis B. Mayer and I know this person, that, but I'll get you a job at the Roxy Theatre. I know the owner. And she actually sorts out this interview. And afterwards, they're like thinking, does she actually know him? She goes, oh, it's lovely to see you again. And they're like, I don't think he knew who she was. And they get the job.
Yeah.
So then she's just in their lives. But then she does things like she takes them all to dinner. She's thinking, look at her clothes, they're a bit shabby. I'm not sure she can actually pay for this. Then she gets a box, she's got every different insect in it. She picks a cockroach, puts it on the pudding, and then does this whole drama and faints. So, of course, they all get escorted out, don't have to pay for it. She's an absolute shyster, a total con woman.
Yeah. There's a lot of them about in that scene.
And then the ultimate thing is they get robbed. They actually get robbed.
Yeah.
And she knows that the most wealth they're carrying on them is the jewellery. So these boys come into their hotel room just when they're packing up to leave because they already suspected they should go.
Yeah.
And then she comes in the room as well. She's going, oh, where are you going? Then the blokes rob them. But they fight these blokes off. All these girls fight these boys off. And in the middle of that tussle, F.E. Gorham is gone.
Yeah, she totally set that robbery up.
She totally did. And they're like, let's get out of here.
And then they realised, they didn't know her real name. They didn't know where she lived. They had no way of getting in touch with her. Yeah, proper con woman.
I know. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So anyway,
so is it at this point, so they're still working on vaudeville and stuff. And so the girls have grown up a bit. And Gypsy Rose Lee is about 15 and June is 13. And June runs off with a boy in the chorus, right?
Yeah, and because they're never allowed to talk about their feelings, the mum has no idea she's unhappy, but she said, I'm sick of being the baby, I'm sick of this, I want to have my own life. So she runs off with this boy from the act.
And they run off to be, because they have plans on being a dancer, I guess like Fred Astaire and his sister,
act.
right?
Yeah.
They run off to be kind of that. That's a thing on the circuit, is a boy and girl dance act. So that's what they've gone off to do. But June is young.
She is 13. I'm going to tell you something, because when I read this years ago, I was so hanging for more information. I found her book.
Oh, okay.
I've actually got it's randomly signed.
Have you?
Yeah, signed. And I read her story from then on, which includes going to New York and reconciling with her mother and Rose and it's the whole thing, what happened to them. And I'm not going to say it now. We're going to have to do another podcast on it. It's unbelievably fascinating. Actually, they mention it later because they get a postcard from her and she's a marathon dancer. Which I don't know if you know what that is.
Yeah, there's more money in marathon dancing than tap dancing, apparently. That's what I know.
Yeah. Do you know about
reading
that?
This book. No, it's in this book.
It was a thing around the 20s and 30s. The whole ballroom is full of dancer couples and people pay for tickets and it's 24 hours around the clock. You can pay for a ticket, go and watch any time of day or night and they dance till they drop.
Wow.
They literally pass out.
Oh my God.
And she was a champion. She could dance for 3 days and nights straight. Because look how hard her upbringing is.
Yeah, right.
That's how.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why they were on a postcard and becoming famous for that. Hardcore.
So June has left the act, which is a massive blow because she's the draw, really.
Yeah.
And then the boys also in the act all disappear. So it's just Mum with Gypsy Rose Lee, at the age of 15 left, and they go home to Seattle. They kind of think that's it at this point.
Yeah, they do.
The actor's gone. And so they go back. Do they go and live with Grandad?
Yeah, they do. And she realises she has to get a new act. So she gets all these young girls. And they end up thinking, actually, it was Rose Louise's idea. Turn all their hair blonde and then keep Louise's dark. So she becomes the star of the show. She said they weren't very attractive girls, but once the hair's all blonde, it's so dazzling you don't really look properly.
And they're called Rose Louise and the Hollywood Blondes.
Yeah.
And off they go doing dancing and vaudeville.
Yeah, and honestly, it's just no time before they turn up at a theatre that's burlesque. And Mother's like, no, we're not sinking this low. The next thing you know, it's actually like, if this was said in a group, everyone would collectively gasp. Because there's a point not long after this where somebody says, does your daughter strip? And she looks him in the eye and says, yes, she does. Did you sort of go, oh?
Yeah, no, for sure, because she's so against. But this is her mum being the hustler that she is. It's like when it comes to money, anything is possible, like literally not whoring her own daughter out. But the fact is she was so against burlesque.
Yes.
And the second the dollar signs are springing up in her eyes, she's like, yeah, of course my daughter strips. I mean, she's 16 at this point.
16, yeah. So they run out to get her fabric. Oh my God, it's so interesting though, from the costume aspect.
Well, you're a costume designer. I knew when I was reading this, I kind of thought to myself, oh, Cleo, that's
fascinating.
Yeah.
They describe which fabric, because also Louise, Gypsy Rose Lee, makes costumes as well. She's been making some for the Girls on the Vaudeville Burlesque Act as well. She makes a lot of the costumes, actually. So she's really good at that. So, yeah, they get all this netting and they're bodging together this costume on a really skimpy leotard base. They had about 3 hours to get this act together with 2 different costumes. So she kind of bodges these clumps of netting together and pins them. So her act is to go out there and unpin each, literally take the pin out so it drops. And then she throws the pin into the tuba in the orchestra pit and everyone loves it.
Yes.
So that becomes her act. You learn if you do further reading that her act was more than that. She never really says it. But she reads sonnets and poems, or she talks about what she's really thinking about whilst she does. You might think I'm thinking about men, but I'm actually thinking about this lovely painting, you know.
What I couldn't figure out in the first instance through this book, because obviously I think of strip through a modern lens, like, you know, lap dancing and stuff. But then this is 100 years ago. And actually it was like illegal. Yeah. This is still the 1920s, right? She's 16. And obviously there were obscenity laws and stuff, but there's more to it. And then I watched a clip. There's a film later called Stage Canteen.
Oh, yeah, Stage Door Canteen.
Where she comes out and does her strip. And she basically doesn't... There's a lot of speaking in it. It's a lot of speaking. It's more, you know, like strip tease. Gypsy Rose Lee is more about the tease than the strip.
It's absolutely right. She never, ever was nude. She always had her bits covered.
And it's just like letting a shoulder strap down or rolling down a stocking or whatever. She's not doing the full tit and minge, is she?
Yeah, she isn't, no. Yeah, she's really selling the idea more. And people absolutely loved it because she had a character. And actually, amazingly, a lot more women started going because of her. You know, it was almost more teaching a woman what they could be like. So it was more not just about the body, but about the psychology of it. It's really, really interesting. Mm-hmm. It's like took it out of the male dark underworld, and everyone just loved it. Everyone loved it. And a lot of high-class people started going to her shows. Society people.
This is eventually, as she's becoming, this is like later on where she's a name in New York. Yeah, but at this time in the 1920s, it is still very frowned upon.
Yeah, that's very true.
And like vaudeville, if you've gone from vaudeville to burlesque, people are really looking down on you.
That's so true, yeah.
But, you know, Mum's a hustler and she just needs to go where the money is. And now Gypsy Rose Lee is 16. It's like, well, let's put her on the burlesque stage.
Yeah.
And again, here we are presented with amazing characters in this book. It's just they're all brought to life. It's so much fun. Oh my
God, isn't it? It's like this act that came that they lost their lead stripper because the last hotel they were at, she'd whacked the hotel manager over the head with his own inkwell. So the hotel manager was in hospital and she was in jail.
Yeah. She'd been arrested a few times before, though. I think she was a drunk.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, this act.
Yeah, I think she was.
In Toledo at the Gaiety Theatre, this act turned up and they lost their main attraction.
Yes.
And they needed someone. And, you know, Gypsy Rose Lee was right place, right time, and Mum pushed her forward.
Exactly.
And so she then became almost the star of the show.
Yeah.
You know?
And then she meets Tessie the tit twirler.
I love Tessie the tit twirler. She just
such a character.
Oh my gosh, she's amazing, and she teaches her a lot, right? She,
loads.
You know, teaches her about like wearing heels and doing stuff. But Tessie says that she was just a girl in the chorus, and one day she realised she could make a movement which made her tassels twirl. And she says, the next day I was a star, and I've been a star ever since. Just from making her tassels twirl.
She could literally twirl one tit, right, without even moving the other one. It's amazing. She's like, when did you learn you could do that? She's like, I don't know, but as soon as I did, it changed my life. Now I'm the head of the bill.
Yeah.
And she's like, absolute light bulb moment. She goes, oh my God, you don't need talent to be a star. I could do this because I have no talent. She's always been told she has no talent.
Yeah, I kind of didn't like that. She says...
And so I could do something.
Yeah, she says like she couldn't sing, she couldn't dance. Now all of a sudden she was a star and she realised that she didn't have to do anything. But actually you're doing a lot, actually.
She's doing a lot. She's being an interesting person who draws people in. She knows how to work a crowd because it's all she's ever been in front of. And it does describe how she goes into the audience. She's got a giant, what do you call it, powder puff? And she goes and powder puffs the bald men's heads and then ties a bow on man's hair. And it's just really interacting with the men and making fun with them.
Yeah, what I kind of learned from this is her years. What is she? She's 16 now. She's been in theatre for 10 years. She knows how to ride the laughter. You know, like a really good stand-up comedian?
Yeah.
When the laughter's subsiding, she knows how to hit back and bring it back up again.
Yes.
That's kind of what she's really good at.
She can work it.
She can work it.
Yeah.
So this is when she becomes Gypsy Rose Lee, though, because it's her first starring role, and the man is outside putting her name up on the front of the theatre, and he starts spelling out Rose Louise, and she says no. She says, I'm Rose Lee. And then she goes, oh, actually, Gypsy Rose Lee. And what I love is the reason she did that was because she didn't want her granddad to know.
Yeah.
She didn't want him to find out that she was performing in a burlesque theatre. So she got them to change her name. And you know, that reminded me, remember when we read Nina Simone's book?
Yes, that's why she did it as well.
She didn't want her mum to know she was... She didn't want her mum to know she was playing the dive bars. So she changed her name to Nina Simone. And Gypsy Rose Lee changed her name because she didn't want her granddad to find out. I love that.
I know, but they didn't realise they'd become nationally or internationally famous.
He's going to find out sooner or later.
He did, yes. But the gypsies, because at that point they bought a tent to live in, which was
yes,
it's a whole other story. It's this big army tent they got second hand
to save money from all their hotels.
Yeah, it sleeps 9 of them.
Oh my word!
And the pig. And they've managed to find this place out of the back of some mechanic's place, and there's a few trees and a little stream. They needed fresh water so they could wash and clean the teeth and stuff. But that's literally, it's kind of lovely. It's like a little bit of countryside right on the edge of town.
Yeah, I mean, the girls in the chorus actually loved it. They thought it was fun.
It was a good adventure for a while.
Yeah.
It sounds like. But the first night there's this rustling. They're like, oh my God, what is that outside? And they go, get back, whoever you are, go away, leave us alone. And it keeps carrying on this rustling. They're really, really scared. And the mum's got a gun. Apparently she got it with the tent and the camping equipment, all for $44. So she shoots a few times through the tent. Then they all go outside really shaken up and find a cow, a massive, beautiful... And they love animals, don't they?
Yeah, they
Beautiful
do.
cow, and it's dead. They're up all night digging a massive hole for a cow.
I know, to bury it.
Managed to get this cow in it. Take it back over, and of course it's obvious. But she said in a couple of days the grass starts growing through. Nobody knows. Plus they set their like camping stove and everything over the spot, and they end up like cooking burgers right over where the dead cow is. And then the farmers come looking. They're like, no idea, never seen a cow. It's unbelievable.
Mum, she was such an opportunist. But I tell you, you know, like we've read a lot about a lot of showbiz managers, especially in the music career, who totally exploit their acts. Well, they're also very good at creating the act and creating the success around the act. Because actually what Mum would do, now Gypsy Rose is the star turn, she would receive flowers to her dressing room every night. Like making out she had like loads of admirers and stuff. Actually, it was Mum who was sending those flowers.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then she would also put people in the audience, they called them clacks, who would start the applause and start the laughter and start the whooping. So Mum, you know, she's really is very clued up. She is creating the success of Gypsy Rose Lee in her first star turn.
Yeah, but you've only mentioned the positive bit. She was also sending poison pen letters to the other woman star, which was really upsetting her, and then paying the applause person to heckle the lead woman and say, you're rubbish, get off.
Yeah.
You're out of tune or whatever.
Yeah, right. I forget that poor soprano.
And she absolutely flat out denied all that. Yeah, you see, she's bad. She's a bad mother.
She's a terrible person.
She's a terrible person.
Yeah.
She really is. Oh, my God. So anyway, yeah, basically, she becomes a sensation. And the next thing you know, she's on Broadway. She's in 42nd Street, got a contract with Minsky's. and she becomes a big star.
Minsky.
Minsky's.
So who is Minsky? Have you heard that name before?
Yeah, Minsky's Theatre's still there on Broadway. I'm not sure if it's got another name or not, but it's still there. That very theatre. It's a big Broadway theatre.
So this was the proper big break, right?
Yeah. It really is.
So it's kind of like she's coming from the provinces into the city.
Yes, and their act is dropped. It's just Gypsy Rose Lee as a burlesque star now.
Right, yeah.
And she's now in the New York Times. She's now making national press.
Actually, yeah, she's sharing the bill with people like Abbott and Costello and stuff as well. So she's properly jumped up, yeah.
Absolutely, big time. And she works the press like people do now. Like she describes going to this restaurant. Oh, it's Sardi's, which is a really famous theatrical haunt. But it was at the time where Mr. Sardi was still running it. You know, it's still there. That's still there. But you're right at the start of it. So Mr. Sardi's saying, oh, hello, Gypsy, here's your table. And she's chatting to this person, that person. And she's working the room and dropping stories with the journalists. Oh, this happened to me today. Or, oh, my mother said this. And then her mother would go, I'm suing the papers because they've said that I'm this and this. And she's dropped the story herself. She's gone, oh, they're calling me a lesbian, or I used to be a man, or I used to this and that. And she's going, I'm loving it, and I'm feeding these stories because they're making me more famous.
Yeah.
And then she also had a jewel robbery, right? You know, she obviously is rich now. She's got an apartment in New York City. She's rich. They stole all her jewels, and she said that made more publicity than I could have dreamed. And ever after that, whenever anyone got robbed, they always mentioned my robbery. Now I'm harking back to when we read Joan Collins, and she got robbed of all her jewellery, which was $500,000.
Oh, I thought it was Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Was it Zsa Zsa Gabor? It's one of these women. Was it Zsa Zsa?
Yeah, I thought it was Zsa Zsa Gabor. Yeah, she has something like a $4 million ring on her, didn't she?
Since reading Gypsy Rose Lee, and that was her biggest publicity, I'm now doubting that she really got robbed.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that was a setup.
Well, you know what? That happened to Kim Kardashian about a couple of years ago. She had a massive robbery where they stole like millions of dollars of her jewellery. Perhaps that was just publicity as well.
Was that from her house?
Don't know. That might have been in a hotel room.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
But I guess these people do walk around with a lot of money. There's a story about Fanny Price on tour. She's got like £450 million worth of pearls. And when they're on tour together, she divides them. and her and Gypsy Rose Lee both wear them all to bed every night. I mean, so you'd have to kill them to get them. It's a mad world, these. But yeah, so, this book jumps to part 3 where she's basically made it, and it just hops to there and her
Well, I'm amazed at how much she's made it, because like you say, it jumps to the third part, and all of a sudden she's in a massive house. She has a house in the country. They have staff.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the third part, her mum comes in and says, could one of the staff make me a cup of coffee? I'm like, what? They have staff now?
Yeah.
And they have like 6 staff over 2 houses. So bloody hell, Gypsy Rose Lee is one of the biggest stars in America then at this point.
No, she really is. Well, there's loads of the pictures in this book, isn't there? All the different cartoons.
She's
she became
constantly in
so famous. Yeah, and she said there were so many people copying her. There were drag queens of her. They were everywhere. She was so famous in her day. And that was before she even went to Hollywood.
But she got to Hollywood quite old though, didn't she? It was like years after she was established and was like this massive thing.
When I told you I watched the G-String Murders, in the middle of that, what's her name? It's like Britt Eklund or someone like that comes in, and she's just absolutely young, blonde and hot. And Gypsy Rose Lee suddenly looks not so attractive and much older, and you realise actually you've already moved into a new era. By then you're going into the 50s, I suppose. And there's a whole new wave of young people coming up. So she was a little bit past it to be a young stripper in Hollywood. So she ends up taking a few odd roles, but I don't think she really made it. And I think she went back to touring, and I think she did a lot of Vegas in the end. But you have to read. Oh, here's another thing I have not told you. I read her son's book as well. That's how hooked I was after reading this book.
Oh, really? So she had a son with Otto Preminger.
Yeah. And in this book, her son Eric tells you that oh my God, it's another Mommy Dearest.
Oh,
it really is.
Really?
Yeah, because they have these kids and they become just your property, same as she was to her mum. It's all she knows.
Yeah, right, of course.
Yeah. So she has a little boy helper as soon as he can walk. And he's 16 and she's still going, none of your business who your dad is. And he's going, it is my business.
Yeah.
It is. But he absolutely begs her to tell him. And she says, okay, all right, it's Otto Preminger because he was a big Hollywood director, and producer, massively important. And she'd just gone through the people in Hollywood and picked him because she thought it would be a good sort of gene pool.
Right.
I don't know if she even told him. She never wanted him to be part of her son's life, but she just thought he'll get the brains and, she's just a bit cold and hard on this. When we leave her in this book, she's got a love of her life, a man, but he's married and he can't leave his wife, so romance is a bit odd for her. How could you be normal after this upbringing? You couldn't.
Yeah, it's a real curious later life. Like you say, Hollywood never really took off. And I think she was a victim of the times in that her version of burlesque, because we were back in the 30s and 40s, it wasn't stripping or burlesque or even sex as we know it now. And I think by the time she hit Hollywood, it had moved into a new era.
It had.
And like you say, there were younger people who were probably could be a bit sexier. Than she could have been, if you know what I mean. It's almost like she was from a different era.
Absolutely.
And in fact, I think she said that in one of the films. And when she got to Hollywood, she was like, all right, it's going to be glamour. Actually, they put her in a grey wig and she played the kazoo with cymbals strapped to her legs. Oh. So that doesn't sound very sexy, does it?
No, it doesn't. But doesn't this leave you wanting more, this book?
Oh, yeah. It was just so funny.
You're like, what happens next? What happens next?
Well, she died quite young, didn't she?
She did, yeah. She died. She died in 1970. So do the maths. What's that, 59?
Yeah.
Yeah, she says in this book, because her mum had got this massive house out in the country that she'd paid for and was taking in lodgers and was just really mean to her, really nasty.
Yeah.
Yeah, she got nastier and nastier. And when she got cancer, I think that's her son again at the end of this book saying this, that she said, that's my last gift from my mother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, further reading, Eric Preminger's book about his mother is absolutely superb. It's another great book. It just takes it from where this stops all the way to the end of her life, including all the crazy stuff that happened out of that house with her mother. I mean, and then June Havoc's book does the same. It takes it from... So there's so much further reading, and they're both brilliant, brilliant accounts of the time.
Does it say that her mum shot somebody dead?
Yes. There's a whole scandal about that.
Wow.
So that's in Eric's book.
Yeah, we need to go thrifting.
Yeah. Well, I've got June Havoc's signed. We'd have to share that one, and I want it back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to Eric's. I would have passed it on. I always pass the ones I love on. So we do have to search for that again. Okay. But anyway, we can't do all of it. This might cover it. And I'll just say to you or anyone out there, go and read all these books. They are incredible.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Thrift Shop Biography. We love making this podcast and we're absolutely thrilled that so many of you are already listening. You could really help us out by leaving us a review somewhere, wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you could share us, tell your friends about us, or drop some links on social media. We have a Facebook page called Thrift Shop Biography, so make sure you come over there to hear about the episodes first and what else we're up to. Okay, see you next week. And if you're new here, there are loads more episodes now to go and listen in the back catalogue, so make sure you go and enjoy them. Okay, thank you very much.